all the more the intense individuality of the whole phenomenon. In the end, we fall back on the hackneyed symbolism of a mechanical equilibrium. A mind is a system of ideas, each with the excitement it arouses, and with tendencies impulsive and inhibitive, which mutually check or reinforce one another. The collection of ideas alters by subtraction or addition in the course of experience, and the tendencies alter as the organism gets more aged. A mental system may be undermined or weakened by this interstitial alteration, just as a building is, and yet for a time keep upright by dead habit. But a new perception, a sudden emotional shock, or an occasion which lays bare the organic alteration, will make the whole fabric fall together, and then the center of gravity sinks into an attitude more stable, for the new ideas that reach the center in the rearrangement seem now to be locked there, and the new structure remains permanent. Formed associations of ideas and habits are usually factors of retardation in such changes of equilibrium. New information, however acquired, plays an accelerating part in the changes, and the slow mutation of our instincts and propensities, under the unimaginable touch of time, has an enormous influence. Moreover, all these influences may work subconsciously or half unconsciously. Footnote: Jouffroy is an example. Quote, "Down this slope it was that my intelligence had glided, and little by little it had got far from its first faith. But this melancholy revolution had not taken place in the broad daylight of my consciousness. Too many scruples, too many guides and sacred affections had made it dreadful to me, so that I was far from avowing to myself the progress it had made. It had gone on in silence, by an involuntary elaboration of which I was not the accomplice, and although I had in reality long ceased to be a Christian, yet, in the innocence of my intention, I should have shuddered to suspect it, and thought it calumny had I been accused of such a falling away." End footnote. And when you get a subject in whom the subconscious life, of which I must speak more fully soon, is largely developed, and in whom motives habitually ripen in silence, you get a case of which you can never give a full account, and in which, both to the subject and the onlookers, there may appear an element of marvel. Emotional occasions, especially violent ones, are extremely potent in precipitating mental rearrangements. The sudden and explosive ways in which love, jealousy, guilt, fear, remorse, or anger can seize upon one are known to everybody. Footnote: Here is a pathological case in which guilt was the feeling that suddenly exploded. Quote, "One night I was seized on entering bed with a rigor, such as Swedenborg describes as coming over him with a sense of holiness, but over me with a sense of guilt. During that whole night I lay under the influence of the rigor, and from its inception I felt that I was under the curse of God. I have never done one act of duty in my life, sins against God and man, beginning as far as my memory goes back, a wildcat in human shape." End footnote. Hope, happiness, security, resolve, emotions characteristic of conversion, can be equally explosive. And emotions that come in this explosive way seldom leave things as they found them. In his recent work on the psychology of religion, Professor Starbuck of California has shown by a statistical inquiry how closely parallel in its manifestations the ordinary conversion, which occurs in young people brought up in evangelical circles, is to that growth into a larger spiritual life, which is a normal phase of adolescence in every class of human beings. The age is the same, falling usually between 14 and 17. The symptoms are the same: sense of incompleteness and imperfection, brooding, depression, morbid introspection and sense of sin, anxiety about the hereafter, distress over doubts, and the like. And the result is the same, a happy relief and objectivity, as the confidence in self gets greater through the adjustment of the faculties to a wider outlook. In spontaneous religious awakening, apart from revivalistic examples, and in the ordinary storm and stress and molting time of adolescence, we also may meet with mystical experiences, astonishing the subjects by their suddenness, just as in revivalistic conversion. The analogy, in fact, is complete, and Starbuck's conclusion as to these ordinary youthful conversions would seem to be the only sound one. Conversion is in its essence a normal adolescent phenomenon, incidental to the passage from the child's small universe to the wider intellectual and spiritual life of maturity. Theology, says Dr. Starbuck, quote, takes the adolescent tendencies and builds upon them, and sees that the essential thing in adolescent growth is bringing the person out of childhood into the new life of maturity and personal insight. It accordingly brings those means to bear which will intensify the normal tendencies. It shortens up the period of duration of storm and stress. Close quote. The conversion phenomena of conviction of sin last, by this investigator's statistics, about 1/5 as long as the periods of adolescent storm and stress phenomena, of which he also got statistics. But they are very much more intense. Bodily accompaniments, loss of sleep and appetite, for example, are much more frequent in them. Quote, the essential distinction appears to be that conversion intensifies, but shortens the period by bringing the person to a definite crisis. The conversions which Dr. Starbuck here has in mind are of course mainly those of very commonplace persons, kept true to a pre-appointed type by instruction, appeal, and example. The particular form which they affect is the result of suggestion and imitation. Footnote. No one understands this better than Jonathan Edwards understood it already. Conversion narratives of the more commonplace sort must always be taken with the allowances which he suggests. Quote, a rule received and established by common consent has a very great, though to many persons an insensible influence in forming their notions of the process of their own experience. I know very well how they proceed as to this matter, for I have had frequent opportunities of observing their conduct. Very often their experience at first appears like a confused chaos, but then those parts are selected which bear the nearest resemblance to such particular steps as are insisted on, and these are dwelt upon in their thoughts, and spoken of from time to time, till they grow more and more conspicuous in their views, and other parts which are neglected grow more and more obscure. Thus, what they have experienced is insensibly strained, so as to bring it to an exact conformity to the scheme already established in their minds. And it becomes natural also for ministers, who have to deal with those who insist upon distinctness and clearness of method, to do so too. Close quote. End footnote. If they went through their growth crisis in other faiths and other countries, although the essence of the change would be the same, since it is one in the main so inevitable, its accidents would be different. In Catholic lands, for example, and in our own Episcopalian sects, no such anxiety and conviction of sin is usual as in sects that encourage revivals, the sacraments being more relied on in these more strictly ecclesiastical bodies. The individual's personal acceptance of salvation needs less to be accentuated and led up to. But every imitative phenomenon must once have had its original, and I propose that for the future we keep as close as may be to the more first-hand and original forms of experience. These are more likely to be found in sporadic adult cases. Professor Leuba, in a valuable article on the psychology of conversion, subordinates the theological aspect of the religious life almost entirely to its